Hey, what's up everybody? It's David here with Tough Guys TV, and on this episode we are going to be building a custom grill storage cabinet, but we're going to be building it out of a propane tank that looks like a replica of a Strickland propane tank from King of the Hill. And what this thing is supposed to be is you open it up and it is a storage cabinet for your grill and grilling accessories. All right, now let's get started. Now, of course, we need to start this project off with a propane tank, and in this case, we picked up this propane tank from Tractor Supply. It was 150 bucks, and the next step is I wanted to evacuate any gases that were inside of it. Even though it was an empty tank, I still wanted to make sure that there were no gases from manufacturing that were still trapped inside of it. Next up, I used a few different types of tools to get this top part loose, and it did take a little bit of work, but once it's loose, it just comes right out all in one piece, so you can remove that and set it to the side for later. You will need to modify this if you want to put it back into the tank at the end so that it still looks like a propane tank, so make sure you hold on to it. The next part, I'm going to fill the tank with water. Now again, this is more precautionary as there was not any propane in this tank, but because there was the risk of other chemicals inside of it, I did some research online and it said that filling it with water before making the cuts made things safer. Next up, I'm just going to do my darndest here to make a straight line on the front of the tank because I'm going to be putting these two doors on the front. So I want my first cut to be the straightest that I could do. And what I did was just marked it off with tape and used the Sharpie to mark my line so that I could follow along with the angle grinder. There may have been a better way to get this exactly straight and perfect, but for what I was doing, it worked pretty well. I started off with this old piece of angle iron to give myself a straight line just to get it started, and then I removed that from the tank, and then I just went freehand with the angle grinder. You will see some imperfections in the overall finish once I take the tape off, but the line itself is actually pretty straight and true. And once I have the paint on at the end, you'll kind of see that the lines actually ended up working out pretty well for me. And since I didn't have any experience cutting a propane tank before, I'm not familiar with the metals or the chemicals that I'm throwing into the air, I wanted to use a mask to protect my lungs, and of course eye protection and ear protection. And if you don't have any experience using an angle grinder, these things are surprisingly loud, and especially if you're in a big open shop, the sound goes a long way. Now, one important note for this section is to not cut all the way through the tank here and remove these door sections, because having them still attached to the tank with small bits of metal is actually really helpful for laying out all the screw holes that you need for the hinges so that everything stays aligned and nice and easy. I have everything taped off so you can see where I cut all the way through down the center, but those sides I did not cut all the way through. And again, here's how I want these screw holes to eventually look. We're going to drill through, and then we're going to use a countersink bit to make it look nice and clean. Now, your drill bit may vary depending on the type of fastener you're actually going to use, but I picked up this kit from Bosch and it worked really well for us, and the drill driver handled the drill bits, and then I have another drill driver that I put a countersink bit into. Here were the stainless steel screws that I'm going to attach into the side of the tank. These are just regular Phillip head, and then I also have a locking nut set that we're going to put on the inside of the tank. And now I'm going to show you why you want to do the countersink. It's so that from the outside, once I repaint everything, it's going to look nice and smooth and it's going to be hard to notice. Same as the screws, I picked up these piano hinges at Home Depot, and they are also stainless steel. And you can see here when I lay it over the top, everything lines up nice and easy. Now these hinges are going to be installed on the inside of the doors, not on the outside. They'll be on the inside so that you don't see them, and on the outside, all you'll see is the screw holes. So next we're going to go ahead and show what the drilling process was like. Overall, this was pretty easy. I did use a little brush to just keep things clean as I went. And then I removed the tape when I was ready to do the countersinking so that I could actually see how far I was getting into the metal on the outside. I wanted to be careful here not to go too deep and have the screw sit way too far in. Once I got it nice and flush, I was ready to go. Now, I may have forgot to mention that countersink bit is actually by Irwin, and the drill bits were by Bosch, in case that was an important detail and you were looking to actually pick one of these up for yourself. Now that I have all of the holes drilled, I was able to go back to cutting, and you can see here I destroyed my AWP gloves. These were not designed to be used with using an angle grinder and throwing sparks directly at your hand. So again, make sure you're using the correct type of PPE, and you won't be dealing with gloves that you have to duct tape in order to protect your hands. And in case you didn't notice, I covered all of these pieces with tape so that way when I did make the final cut through, the door sections didn't just fall into the propane tank and then potentially ding up a corner or something. So another little quick tip there, kind of learn as I went. And here's the tank with the door sections totally removed from it, so you can see how that looks. All the countersink holes turned out pretty solid, and there's only a little bit of burr along the edge that we'll need to clean up later. Another quick little PSA, these edges of the cut sections of the doors and on the tank are extremely sharp, so be careful when you're handling these. I probably should have been using gloves. Hey, can I jump in here for just a moment? I want to tell you about these shirts by Ariat Work. They are the heat fighter shirts specifically designed for working in your shop or out in the elements in the summer. Now, I often don't talk about clothing here on the channel. That is something that I'm trying to share more of, especially now that I've gotten to know Ariat and what they are doing. And so far, my experience has been great. The shirts themselves are flexible. They come in a bunch of different colors if that's your thing. Now, all of these are pocket tees if you're into those. They also have a pen slot, which easily holds a construction pencil. And on top of that, the shirts are super flexible, moisture wicking, and they have great seam construction. They also have a stain release technology, which, believe it or not, has been pretty helpful for me because I regularly mess up my shirts in the shop. And on top of that, they have a technology called Fresh Tech, which inhibits bacteria growth. Now, if you are interested in picking up some of these shirts from Ariat, there'll be a link down in the description where you can save a little bit of money as well. Thank you so much for taking this pause with me. Now back to the video. All right, next up, we're going to use this 4200 series Dremel to clean up all of these rough burred edges on the metal where we cut with the angle grinder. Now, honestly, you could have probably used a different disc on your angle grinder to do this. I just am not as familiar or comfortable using an angle grinder to do that. I have a lot more experience with Dremel, so this for me was just an obvious choice. The goal here, though, is just to remove any of these sharp edges the best that I could. I really wanted to avoid getting a cut on my finger or something when I'm trying to just close the doors later on. Next up, I need to install all the hinges. So we've got those screws we showed earlier with those locking nuts. And basically this is just the process. You put the screw in, then you put the nut on there. It does take a little bit of time and it was kind of hard to hold the door up. But once you get the first couple screws in, the process went pretty fast. And as you can see here, the doors close nicely. And overall, I think that it's starting to come together at this point, and it really does feel like a propane tank in disguise when these two doors are closed. I will have a link down in the description to the paint that we used. I did not get that section of the build recorded. It was a white paint that matched the outside of the propane tank as closely as I could find at the store. It was just off the shelf and not custom built. Now this next step here, I'm cutting the circular pieces that are going to fit into the bottom of the tank. And I ended up cutting 2 or 3 of these because I wanted to have extra pieces. And I also, at this point, was not sure if I was going to have more than one shelf inside of it. And I also thought that maybe the shelf would actually be a full-size circle. So once I made the first circle that I knew fit in the bottom of the tank, I went ahead and used it as a template to make a couple more of them. And for this, I'm just using a jigsaw. And I have a multi-pack from Diablo. This is actually just a quick cutting blade so that I could get through this pretty quick. And I used the sander to clean up the edges before I was done. Now, once I decided I wanted to have a half shelf, then I took one of the pieces before I finished it out and I set it over to the miter station and cut it so that I would have it for the middle shelf. So you can see here I'm test fitting in the bottom piece, and then I'm trying to see if I want to do 1 or 2 shelves on the inside. And ultimately I did decide to do 2 shelves because, as you can see here, it actually fits pretty nice with just the bottom shelf and the top shelf. If I'd had that third one, I think it would have just been too busy and I wouldn't have had enough room to store all the things that I really wanted to store inside of the tank. Now this might be different for you if you have different stuff that you want to put in it, so feel free to add the extra shelf if you need to. Now I attached the shelf by putting screws from the outside of the tank in, so I just marked it on the inside. I drilled from the inside to the outside, then countersink from the back, and then attached my screws to the shelves, and that's how I held it in place. Next, I decided to add a little bit of detail work to that bottom plate, and of course I had to do Hank Hill himself here, taste the meat, not the heat, his famous slogan, and I think that turned out pretty cool. We put that down in the bottom. Now, of course, you could customize this however you wanted with whatever catchphrase or whatever characters from the show that you wanted to do from King of the Hill. Now, we also decided we wanted to add lights to the top of this. So since I'd already built this little wood block to attach my door opener on it, I decided to attach the power supply for the lights on the side of that. This whole thing is going to be JB welded up in the inside front of the tank, and the LED lights will work with a remote control. And I'm also going to attach those up into the upper section of the tank so that you can't see them from the ground. So next up, we're going to take that wood block with everything attached to it already, and we're going to put it inside the front of that tank right there. Now this is that JB Weld, it's a 2-part mix. So you just mix the 2 components together and then you stick it up into the top. And once I got it where I needed it to go, you can see my little center mark there. I clamped it in place and allowed this stuff to sit up overnight. I believe it says you only need to set it up for about 30 minutes, but I did not want to risk that. So the next day we came back out and started messing with it. This is even before I took the clamp off, in fact. And I laid the LED strip around the inside, cut it where they say to cut it, and you got to be careful with that if you're not familiar with these things. And these are 3M backed adhesives, so it worked pretty well just like that, and I didn't have to use anything extra. And you can see how the lights work there. Lots of colors, and it's on a remote control. One of the last bits of detail was to put the Strickland Propane logo. Now for this, we created it on our Cricut, but there's probably other vinyl type tools that you could use in order to do this, or you could maybe even custom paint it if you wanted to make some sort of a stencil. I decided to go with the Cricut because it was easiest for us, and I was able to find the colors that match the logo as closely as possible. Now this process is pretty difficult, and you want to make sure that the surface behind the vinyl is really, really clean. And then with the smaller letters, you want to take everything off as slowly as you can. And actually here I ended up pulling off one of the letters, and I had to come back and fix it because, again, just trying to go too fast. And then I pulled off a part of the letter. And luckily for me, I was able to save it in the process and make it look nice at the end. Now standing back and looking at this thing when it's all closed up, it actually looks pretty solid, and it does actually have that propane tank in disguise feel that I was trying to go for. The light remote works really well as long as the doors are open. If the doors are closed, the remote does not want to turn the lights on, so I guess that's sort of a perk. Now as far as functionality, I don't know where you would actually set this thing. For me, it's more of just a piece to talk about, right? That you would have out on your back patio or by your grilling area, or maybe you keep it inside your house if you're that big of a fan. But overall, I think that the project turned out really cool, and I'm super excited to share it with everybody. And make sure you tell me down in the comments if this is something you would actually try to build, or if maybe it's something you would buy if you saw it in a shop somewhere. Oh, and also, I did put that top valve back in the top of the tank to make it totally authentic. Thanks for watching. And alright, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that if you enjoyed this build that maybe it inspired you to create something cool as well. If you do have any questions about anything that we did in the video, just reach out to me here in the comments, or you can reach out on social media at ToughGuysTV on any of the networks. As always, I appreciate you coming back to the channel, and I appreciate all your support, as we could not keep making videos if people didn't view the videos and comment and interact with us. It's really fun to do that, and I'm looking forward to making even more videos very soon. Thanks so much, and I will see you in the next video.